dreamer, come in. If you are a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer, if you are a pretender, come, sit by my fire. For we have some flax golden tales to spin. Come in. Come in. Imagine, if you will, a world where Shel Silverstein's open invitation has been lost or stolen, silenced, or simply only extends to the affluent. Wander further into this world without the arts, this neverland of lost hopes and gray dreams. Peer around the corner of that clean brick wall, free of graffiti or messy murals, impressionist or even impression. For everyone walks the straight and lives the narrow here in this color-starved existence, this world without access to the arts. Oh, look at your faces. You don't like it here, do you? You don't like this world without arts. No. Then let's go home. A mass exodus for the door. Except, and here is the spoiler alert, here is the devilish detail. Here is home. For 16 million poor and impoverished kids in the United States without access to the arts, here is home. For 25% of all children in North Carolina, here is home. It's as home to them as Zora Neale Hurston or Frank Lloyd Wright is to you. But I'm here to assure you, to bear witness, as I was once one of the 25%. I was once one of that 16 million. That, as Stephen Sondheim so aptly slipped into the score of West Side Story, there's a place for us. Somewhere a place for us. Now, ironically, adults with our short-term memories have to be reminded, have to be reminded of that truth. Children, on the other hand, are born knowing it, yearning for it, and need only be guided to it. Sadly, there are very few people willing to guide, willing to shape, willing to mold, willing to point our children with smoldering artistic aspirations to that place. My third grade teacher was Mrs. Dorothy Diley of the Southwest Virginia Diaries. Great-granddaughter of Colonel Andrew Jackson Diley, a girl raised in the South, a grit, a daughter of the Confederacy. I was the lone black child in her class. Shortly after integration had finally made its way into the southernmost regions of Southwest Virginia, Virginia was a strong holdout in the fight for school integration. As a matter of fact, Prince Edward County, Virginia, in 1959 voted to close all of its schools rather than to allow a single black child to darken school doorsteps. Every single public school closed for 4 years. So there I was, a product of Brown, being bused some 30, 45 minutes across town to the mostly, if not all, white neighborhoods of the city. By the late 1970s, 45% of all African-American children in the South were bused to predominantly white schools. An early assignment, I recall, asked that we students pick out the Sunday comic strip we read and liked the most. Now, I loved cartoons. What child doesn't? Loved art. What child doesn't? Loved drawing. What child doesn't? So while the other kids went with the Peanuts or Beetle Bailey, I went in a completely different direction. You see, we didn't get the daily paper at our house, let alone the Sunday edition. That was 75 cents that could have gone towards milk or bread, bus fare, or keeping the lights on, or the bill collector at bay. Not the newspaper. So outside of peering over the shoulder of someone who was reading the paper, I rarely saw it. But when I did, one particular comic strip jumped out at me. Andy Cap. That's your favorite comic strip, Michael? Andy Cap? Mrs. Dyerly's skepticism poured from her mouth like blackstrap molasses or the warm gray smoke from one of my grandmother's Benson and Hedges menthols. In a way that wasn't a question. It wasn't even a statement. It was an accusation. An accusation that I must be lying. What in my little poverty-stricken world could possibly give me an inkling of understanding the world of Andy Capp? You see, Andy was a working class figure who had trouble finding work. He lived with his life flow. They argued, they fought, he drank, he watched football, and he was always on the verge of having his furniture repossessed. If that wasn't my little poverty-stricken world, I don't know what was. What could you possibly understand about Andy Capp? December of that third grade year, she wrote and directed the third grade Christmas pageant, which she called, "It's a Small World After All." So, there were only 2 children of color in our entire class, myself and Wei Lin, a Vietnamese girl who spoke very little English. So after Mrs. Dyerly cast the entire white section of the class as individual countries, she then turned towards Wei Lin and myself and said, "Michael, you're gonna be Africa, and Wei Lin, you're gonna be Asia. Let's practice." A few years after that, my mother finally broke the cycle, and when I say the cycle, I mean that cycle of abuse. And she moved us to a 4-room duplex, not far away. And though the physical move was simple, the emotional journey was far more difficult. You see, I watched family members and neighbors and friends get arrested. I watched fights break out in school that turned into shootouts on the street. Because I learned at a young age that you had to be ready to fight for what you believed in, to stand up for it, to throw down, as we would call it. You had to be ready to throw down. Claude didn't like his sister, Lena, dating Melvin. So Claude beat the hell out of Melvin one afternoon in the cafeteria. Now, Melvin was a little guy, could barely protect himself. Until a few weeks later, when we were all getting off the school bus at 10th Street in Loudon, not far from the corner store where they had a flea infection a year before, a flea infestation that we didn't care about. We'd ran in and get our cherry knee-highs and our Mike and Ikes and all of that. Well, on that particular day, Melvin stood waiting for Claude with a pistol. As Claude descended the bus steps, Melvin shot Claude point blank in the face. The bullet lodged in his cheek, just inches from killing him, just inches from killing one of us. Still, through it all, I knew there was a place for me. Somewhere there was a place for me. So I secretly rode the city bus downtown where they were holding auditions for Alice in Wonderland. There I was, this skinny, moon-faced black kid in a sea of Punky Brewsters and Ricky Schroders. "What's your name?" "Mike Wiley." "And what role will you be reading?" "The Queen of Hearts." "But the queen is a woman." "I know." "And you'd still like to read for it?" "Yes, ma'am. It's the best part." Later that evening, as I stood under the awning of the Woolworths as the rain poured down, and I watched those kids get into their shiny Volvos and their warm BMWs, a tall woman with beautiful brown skin and deep eyes and an Adam's apple looked down at me and she said, "Whose little boy are you?" Now, when I look back on that moment, I realized what she was asking me, "Whose little boy are you?" was not who my parents were. She was asking me, "Where do I belong?" Where do you fit in? Now, I wish I could tell you that I bagged that audition and I got the role of the Queen of Hearts because they were just so taken with my gumption. Or that Mrs. Dyerly and I became friends. You know, I called her Mrs. Daisy and she called me Hoke, and we had tea on Sundays. Although I always wonder what would have happened if we had a Latino kid in that class, you know. And Juan Pablo, you get to be South America, Central America, Spain, and the Bronx. Let's practice. No. What I do recall is one teacher, knowing that there was a place for me, asking me to be Abraham Lincoln in our school play. So I stood up on stage in our cafeteria. That was also our gymnasium. That was also our auditorium. So it was a Kappa gymatorium. And I said, well, sir, the people of the North believe that there should not be any more slavery. Yet because of economics and selfish reasons, the Southern states wanted slavery to continue to help them raise crops. And all the students cheered. And my mama was on the front row, because that's where mamas like to sit, right? And she was looking on, mm-hmm. And she said, y'all know what she said, that's my baby. And from that day forward, I knew there was a place for me. The arts in America, the NEA, taking guns out of the hands of young people and replacing them with paintbrushes, play scripts, film cameras, clay. Taking folks off the streets and putting them on stage in dark rooms, giving them a brand new beat to walk and dance to that doesn't end at the courthouse. So I ask you, if you believe in the arts and everything that the arts can do, there's a place for you. Just like there was a place for me. On the way here today, I heard a song on the radio by David Bowie, and I've never been really good or particularly swell at deciphering lyrics. I'm pretty terrible at it, actually. You know, help me, Rhonda, help me, Rhonda, get her out of my car. Or swing low, sweet cherry pie. Well, so I listened to it, and I thought, yeah, even though Bowie didn't sing these lyrics, this is what I hear. I won't be king, and you won't be queen. But we can be heroes just for one day. We can be artists. So I ask you, are you ready to fight for the arts? Are you ready to stand up for what you believe in? Are you ready to throw down? Thank you.